The casket was still being lowered when I noticed her seat was empty. My daughter-in-law, the one who called herself Zach's soulmate, never showed. Not for the service, not for the burial, not for a single tear. 4 hours later, I opened Instagram and there she was, laughing, glass raised, a hashtag that read, "Chiron healing." I sat in my son's empty room, the air still heavy with the scent of his uniform, and realized something colder than grief. She didn't forget. She chose not to come. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The chapel was full, but Eileen felt alone. Rows of mourners filled every pew, their shoulders stiff with ceremony and sadness. The soft hum of the organ barely touched her ears. She stood in front of the casket, Zachary's casket, and stared at the polished walnut like it had grown there, rooted in the marble floor, immovable. She couldn't feel her feet. The flag lay folded, pristine, sharp corners that mocked the chaos his death had left behind. Just beside it, on a tall black easel, stood a framed photo. Zach in uniform, eyes steady, jaw proud, the faintest edge of a grin pulling at the corner of his mouth. Her baby boy, 24 years old, back from a second deployment in one piece, only to die stateside, on American soil. It should have felt like a betrayal. Instead, it just felt like absence. The pastor cleared his throat beside her. "Ms. Langford, do you want us to give it another minute?" Eileen blinked, disoriented. She followed his eyes to the front row. One seat sat empty. Perfectly aligned, deliberately saved. Haley's seat. Eileen's lips pressed into a tight line. She shook her head once, curt and final. "Let's begin." The pastor nodded and stepped forward, raising his voice to the congregation. Words poured out, scripture, remembrance, comfort. But Eileen heard none of them. Her eyes locked on that seat like it might burst into flames. She'd told Haley about the funeral 2 days ago. Sent a message, left a voicemail. No reply, no acknowledgement, not even a goddamn emoji. And now, she wasn't here. A breeze tickled the back of her neck from the air vent overhead. It was the only thing that proved she hadn't frozen solid. They moved through the service. A young man from Zach's unit spoke about leadership, loyalty, jokes over terrible instant coffee in sand-colored tents. Her sister Rachel squeezed her hand when his voice cracked. The chapel wept in unison. But not Eileen. She didn't cry. Couldn't. Her grief had calcified, hard and dry. Like if she let one tear fall, the rest would come and never stop. After the final hymn and the slow-motion nightmare of the burial, rifle shots splitting the air, the robotic precision of the flag folding, people began to scatter. Friends and neighbors murmured condolences that felt pre-scripted. A few touched her arm. Others nodded from a distance, as if her grief might be contagious. The cemetery emptied under a bleak, gray sky. Eileen stood at the grave long after the chairs had been cleared. Zach's name was already etched into the temporary marker. The dates looked too close together. Too soon. Too cruel. She turned when she felt a presence behind her. It was Rachel. She looked tentative, nervous in that way she only got when something was wrong. "What is it?" Eileen asked, voice low. Rachel didn't speak right away. Instead, she glanced around, then held out her phone. "I wasn't going to say anything," she murmured. "But you should see this." Eileen took the phone, confused. On the screen was a paused video, blurry footage, time-stamped from last night. A bar. Familiar. She tapped play. The grainy video shook as someone whispered behind the camera. "That's Haley, right? With... is that..." The screen showed Haley. Drunk, laughing, draped across some guy's lap in a booth. A guy Eileen recognized instantly. Eli Winters. Zach's best friend. The one who'd flown home with his body. the one who'd cried on Eileen's shoulder just 2 nights ago. In the background, someone lifted a shot glass. The group toasted. Laughed. Clinked glasses like nothing in the world was broken. Eileen's thumb hovered over the pause button. Her hand trembled. She looked up at Rachel, eyes hardening. "How old is this?" "Last night," Rachel said quietly. 11:30. Eileen exhaled once, sharp as a knife. The phone screen went dark in her palm. She stared out at Zach's grave, at the wet soil they'd just shoveled over his casket. Her son was gone, and Haley hadn't even shown up to say goodbye. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. Eileen turned back toward the car, jaw clenched. Something in her shifted. Not grief, not yet rage, but something older, colder. A voice deep down that whispered, "This isn't over." The house was too quiet. Eileen sat on the edge of her bed, shoes still on, dress still stiff from the wind at the cemetery. The room hadn't changed since Zach left for his second deployment. Picture frames lined up with military precision, his old high school hoodie folded on the chair in the corner, untouched. Rachel sat at the end of the bed, scrolling silently. Eileen hadn't spoken much on the drive home. The ache behind her eyes hadn't turned into tears. Just pressure, like a storm still gathering. Rachel cleared her throat softly. "There's something else." Eileen didn't look at her. "Another video?" Rachel hesitated. "No, a post." That made Eileen look up. Rachel turned the screen toward her. It was Haley's Instagram. Public. Still active. The most recent post sat at the top. Bright, airbrushed, perfectly framed. Haley in a low-cut black tank top, glossy lips pursed in a half-smile, frozen mid-toast at the bar from the video. Her arm was around Eli, both of them framed by neon and backlit whiskey bottles. There were other friends in the background, raising glasses. The caption read, "Grateful for the ones who really show up tar healing." The word healing hit Eileen like a shove to the chest. Her thumb hovered. She tapped into the comments. They were flooding in. "Yes, Queen, live your truth. You deserve this. Some people never get it. The strength it takes to walk away. Proud of you." Heart emojis. Fire emojis. Champagne bottles. People who didn't know Zach, didn't know what Haley had walked away from, didn't care. They were cheering her on like she was the one who'd been left behind. Eileen stared at the post until the screen blurred. "She knew," Rachel said gently, like stepping over broken glass. "I sent her the same details I sent you. Same time, same address. There's no way she didn't see it." Eileen said nothing. The silence pulsed in the room like an open wound. Then, without a word, she pressed the home button and closed the app. She placed the phone face down on the nightstand. Outside, wind brushed against the windows, dry leaves scratching along the driveway like something looking for a way in. Rachel shifted. "Do you want me to stay?" Eileen's voice was low, flat. "No. I'll call you tomorrow." Rachel stood reluctantly, but she knew not to press. She paused at the door. "I meant what I said. If you want to burn her whole world down, I'll bring the matches." Eileen didn't answer. After Rachel left, she sat there in the dark for a long time. The digital clock glowed 10:22 p.m. Outside, the wind picked up. Finally, she stood. Her legs ached, but she ignored it. She crossed the room and knelt in front of the old filing cabinet wedged between the closet and the bookcase. It hadn't been opened in months. She pulled out the bottom drawer. Inside, between tax records and medical forms, was a thin blue folder, labeled in Zach's handwriting, "Will plus letter, in case I'm not back." She stared at it. She'd seen it after his first deployment. He'd left it in her care, back when he was just a cocky 19-year-old who thought making a will was the grown-up thing to do. She hadn't opened it then. He'd come home. This time, he hadn't. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the folder out and placed it on the bed. She opened it. Inside, neat as ever, was a typed will, dated 10 months ago. Signed. Witnessed. Everything by the book. And behind it, one sealed envelope. Her name handwritten across the front. Mom. The room held its breath. She reached for the envelope and stopped. Her hand hovered, because for the first time since the funeral, a thought burned through the fog of grief like a lit fuse. What if Zach had known? She didn't open the envelope that night. She couldn't. Not yet. Instead, Eileen sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, a yellow desk lamp casting shadows across the folder's contents. The will was straightforward, almost clinical. Zach had left everything to be split between his mother and his wife. Half and half. No poetry, no long explanations. Just names, numbers, signatures. But it was the names that wouldn't let her breathe. There, in thick legal print, was Haley's full name. Haley Rose Langford. Not scrawled or penciled in. Typed. Permanent. Intentional. Zach had signed it. Rachel, now barefoot and changed into sweats, hovered at the doorway holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. Anything surprising? Eileen didn't look up. She's listed as co-beneficiary on everything. Rachel came closer. All of it? Eileen nodded once. Life insurance, savings, the VA pension if it clears. Even the house. If I were dead too, she'd own the deed outright. Rachel sat beside her, careful not to bump the paper stacks. She reached for the will, scanning it quickly. Her eyes paused on the final page. She's named executor? Eileen let out a humorless laugh. That's the part that almost made me vomit. Rachel blinked. He trusted her that much? Eileen leaned her head back against the dresser, eyes on the ceiling. He didn't know her. Not really. There was a long pause. You tried to warn him, Rachel said quietly. And just like that, it cracked open inside her, memory sharp, too vivid. They were in the kitchen last fall. Zach had just flown in on emergency leave to attend Uncle Cal's funeral. He was exhausted, jet-lagged, his uniform hung over a chair. Haley hadn't come with him. She said she's not into family events, he'd muttered, stirring his coffee like it personally offended him. She gets anxious, doesn't like being judged. She doesn't like being seen, Eileen had said, rinsing the dishes with more force than necessary. Big difference. Zach had turned sharp then. You've never liked her? That's not true, she'd said, though it was. I tried, but she doesn't show up, Zach, to anything. Not birthdays, not anniversaries, not your cousin's baby shower, not your deployment dinner. Hell, she's skipped the last 4 Sunday meals. She's private, he'd said, jaw tight. You don't get to define what support looks like. Support doesn't hide. He'd stood up too fast, knocking the spoon onto the floor. She remembered the way his shoulders looked from behind, tense, betrayed, like she was the one hurting him. They hadn't spoken about Haley again. Now, back in the present, Rachel's voice brought her back. You think he changed the will after that argument? Possibly, Eileen said. This version is dated January, before his last tour. Rachel flipped a few pages, lips pursed. God, I hate how organized he was. Eileen gave a hollow chuckle. It's what makes this harder. He didn't leave any ambiguity. Rachel's eyes scanned the bottom of a bank summary page. Wait, this one? Look. It says she's a joint account holder. Eileen leaned forward. Rachel tapped her finger on the document. She could drain this account right now. You wouldn't even know until it's too late. A slow current of nausea rolled through Eileen's stomach. And then, something colder. Not fear. Not even rage. Calculation. She stood up, walked to her nightstand, and pulled open the drawer. From the back of it, tucked beneath an old checkbook and expired CVS coupons, she pulled out a cream-colored business card. Slightly bent at the edges but legible. Alan Wexler, attorney at Law Veterans Rights, Estate Disputes, Fraud Litigation Boston, M.A. Rachel stood too. Is that who helped you with the VA paperwork? Eileen nodded once. He owes me a favor. She stared down at the card. Her fingers brushed over the embossed lettering. Then she turned and looked Rachel dead in the eye. If she thinks she's walking away with half of my son's life— She let the words hang there, unfinished, because she didn't need to say them out loud. Alan Wexler didn't offer condolences when he picked up the phone. He wasn't the type. What he offered was silence, long, weighted, legally significant silence, as Eileen finished explaining what she'd found in Zach's will. When he finally spoke, his voice was clipped, East Coast fast. I'd like you to scan and email the documents you mentioned. Today. All of them. I can do that, Eileen said. Her throat felt raw. I'll start pulling federal records from the DoD and VA. If she's already filed a claim on Zach's military benefits, it'll show. It was the first time someone said if instead of when. Eileen hung up and immediately began sorting through folders. Her fingertips burned against every paper. Birth certificates, discharge papers, his old DD-214 form. Rachel helped from the dining table, quietly forming piles labeled with Post-its. Medical, bank, VA, home. By early afternoon, Alan called back. She didn't waste time, he said. Eileen braced herself. Haley filed a preliminary benefits claim with the VA 48 hours after Zach was pronounced. Not just for his pension. She's claiming the survivor benefit annuity, and she filed with the state probate office for spousal support from the estate. Eileen's hand tightened around the phone. She what? She wants income, Eileen. Monthly. Retroactive to the day he died. She's moving fast. Like someone who's been coached. Rachel sat up straight, her mouth slightly open. We didn't even know probate started. She filed a death certificate copy through a private claims consultant. Must have gotten it from the funeral director. It's legal, if slimy. Eileen's heart slammed against her ribs. So she's already ahead of us? She's trying to be. Alan paused, then added, but she's sloppy. That gave Eileen pause. Alan continued. She filed using a general claim form, standard boilerplate. No lawyer on her side, which means she thinks you'll roll over. I won't. I didn't think you would. That's why I checked something else. Eileen waited. Every second hung like thread. She submitted a power of attorney form, dated October 2nd of last year, gives her broad authorization over Zach's affairs. Rachel blinked. Wait, a POA? She claimed he signed it in person at their apartment. No witnesses, just his signature. Eileen stood too fast. The phone nearly slipped from her hand. That's not possible, she said. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Wasn't Zach deployed in October? Exactly, Eileen whispered. He wasn't even stateside. I have the itinerary from the Army. He left in September and didn't return until Thanksgiving. Alan's voice grew colder. That might be your opening. Rachel leaned in, wide-eyed. He never told you he gave her power of attorney? Eileen shook her head, stunned. Never, and he knew better. After Dad died, we had a whole talk about POAs. He called them blank checks for liars. Rachel let out a short breath. Then why sign one? Eileen didn't answer. Not out loud, because deep down she didn't believe he had. Alan was still speaking. If you have travel documentation proving Zach wasn't in Boston on October 2nd and we can show her claim was knowingly filed with a false POA, that's fraud. At minimum, it delays her claims. At most, it nullifies them. Eileen walked to the hallway closet and yanked open the door. Inside, she kept a fireproof box. Zach had insisted on buying it for her. She pulled it down and unlocked it on the kitchen table. Passports, deployment leave forms, flight receipts, time-stamped. She found it in less than 5 minutes. Boarding pass, Sept 27, 2024. Departure, Logan International, Fort Hood. Destination, Kuwait City. Rachel whistled low. There's your alibi. Eileen didn't smile. She reached for her phone, heart cold and steady now. Alan? I'm here. If there's a loophole, she said, voice firm, find it. He paused. Then, I don't deal in loopholes. I deal in fire exits. She closed the folder with a satisfying snap, then light the match. Eileen didn't sleep that night. The house was still, but her mind wasn't. The soft ticking of the clock on Zach's dresser kept time with the thoughts that wouldn't stop circling. Fraud, claims, signatures, lies. By 2 a.m., she was back at the desk, laptop open, glasses low on her nose. She'd logged into her cloud storage earlier to upload documents for Alan, but the system had caught something else. A quiet blue notification pulsed in the corner of her screen. Zachary's iCloud backup restored. Messages, photos, notes. Eileen's hand hovered over the mouse. Then she clicked. The message archive opened like a wound. Zach's texts ran in tidy bubbles, green and gray, time-stamped across months. Some threads were with her, some with Eli, but one contact sat near the top. Haley. Eileen clicked it. The first thing she saw was a wall of silence. Dozens of unanswered messages from Zach. Simple things. You okay? You coming home tonight? I got your car inspected. You're welcome. Then her replies, scattered and distant. Busy. Don't start. You knew what this was. Her stomach tightened. The date stretched through late summer, then stopped entirely for weeks. Rachel wandered in, robe wrapped tight, clutching a mug. You're still up? Couldn't sleep. Rachel set the mug down beside her. What are you looking at? Eileen didn't answer. She scrolled further. Then, one message caught her eye. Zach, 2 months before deployment. You said you'd be back Sunday. Haley. Plans changed. Bee's taking me to Nashville. Eileen froze. Bee? Rachel asked softly. She kept scrolling. More messages. Same name. Bee says I need space. Bee's right, you suffocate me. Stop calling when I'm with him. Each one landed like a punch. Rachel's face paled. She wasn't even hiding it. She didn't have to, Eileen murmured. He still thought she'd come home. There were other texts. Fights, apologies, long stretches of nothing. The last message from Zach was dated November 17th. At least tell me if you're safe. No reply. The cursor blinked at the end of that line, still waiting. Eileen sat back, eyes burning. He died thinking it was his fault. Rachel reached for her hand, but Eileen pulled away. The ache had changed shape again. Less grief, more fury threaded with clarity. She opened a new tab and searched Haley Langford Instagram. The public account loaded instantly, Haley's glossy life for the world to applaud. There she was, posting from a rooftop bar in Austin last March, a hiking trail in Sedona in May, a work retreat in Denver, a music festival in Nashville, the same weekend she'd texted Zach about Bee. Jesus, Rachel muttered. She's been everywhere but home. Eileen clicked through the tags. Haley wasn't alone in most photos, but there was never a clear shot of Bee. Just shadows, forearms, the corner of a tattooed wrist holding a drink. Eileen leaned closer. Zoom in. Rachel did. On one shot, Haley's laughing face was angled toward the camera, sunlight glinting off mirrored sunglasses. In the reflection, barely visible, sat a man. Tall, beard, sunglasses. Not Eli. Someone older. Eileen snapped a screenshot. She wasn't living with Zach. She opened her email and began typing to Alan before she even knew what she'd say. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Alan again. "Been up all night?" he asked. "Pretty much." "I ran her last known address through the USPS forwarding database," he said. "She changed her mailing address 6 months ago. Filed out of Fort Collins, Colorado." Eileen blinked. "That's not Boston," he finished. "Which means she wasn't living with your son when he died. If we can prove she established residence elsewhere, the state may not recognize her as legal next of kin." Rachel straightened. "So she loses everything?" "Potentially. But we'll need proof of intent. Lease agreements, utility bills, digital footprint." Eileen looked back at the glowing screen, the collage of Haley's healing posts stretching across states like a roadmap of betrayal. "Don't worry about that," she said quietly. "She left enough footprints for both of us." Alan exhaled on the other end. "I'll draft the discovery requests. Once we serve her, she'll know we're contesting." Eileen's eyes didn't leave the screen. Haley's most recent photo was from last week. A mirror selfie captioned, "New chapter, same me." Eileen whispered to no one. Not for long. Then she closed the laptop. The house went dark again. Outside, the wind began to rise. Sharp, restless, like the world itself could feel what was coming. Alan's office smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. The kind of room where men signed important things. Deeds, trusts, death notices. Eileen sat stiffly across from him, spine straight, every muscle tight. The folder on the desk between them looked innocuous. It wasn't. "This is the original living trust," Alan said, adjusting his glasses. "Filed the same month Zach bought your house back from the bank. Everything was neat, centralized, smart." Eileen nodded. "That was him." Alan flipped the folder open with the precision of a surgeon. "Then we have this." He pulled a single page from the back. Legal letterhead, typed lines, signature block, unfinished. It was dated 6 months ago. An amendment to the trust. The title read, "Spousal Beneficiary Revocation." Eileen felt her pulse thud in her throat. "He was cutting her out?" she whispered. Alan nodded. "Looks like it. He drafted it himself using one of those legal software kits. It's clean, direct, but..." He tapped the bottom of the page. "He never signed it." Her fingers curled into fists in her lap. Why not? Could have been waiting to finalize it on leave. Could have changed his mind. Or... Alan paused. Maybe he never got the chance. Eileen stared at the blank signature line like it might fill itself in if she waited long enough. "Legally," Alan continued, "this won't hold. Not as enforceable revocation. But if we get the right judge..." He closed the folder slowly. "It tells a story." Outside the office window, Boston pulsed with late autumn life. Streetcars, honking, a man shouting about lost keys. It all sounded impossibly distant. "I've been compiling the timeline," Eileen said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick binder. Receipts, hotel charges, Uber logs. Haley was barely in Boston for 9 months straight. I checked her Venmo. She paid someone for storage fees in Colorado. February. Alan opened the binder and flipped through. The rhythm of pages turning felt like drum beats. Rachel walked in a moment later, laptop under one arm, red cheeks from the wind. "I finished syncing the rest of Haley's socials. Got 3 confirmed locations she was tagged in while Zach was hospitalized last spring." Alan raised an eyebrow. "She wasn't with him." "Not even in the state," Rachel said, dropping into the chair beside Eileen. "We cross-checked her credit card charges too. She was in Scottsdale, spa resort." Alan leaned back, folded his hands. "This is starting to look like fraud." Eileen said nothing. She just stared down at the unsigned amendment again. Her son had tried to fix this. Maybe too late, maybe not. Alan straightened. Now all business. I want to formally file an intent to challenge spousal standing. If we can prove Haley's residency changed, that she was estranged from Zach, and that she knowingly filed with false info, we can force the court to reconsider her standing as next of kin. And if they don't? Eileen asked. Alan's voice was calm, unmoved. Then we'll make it so ugly she wishes we had. Eileen opened her purse and pulled out a crisp white envelope. She's about to get something. Alan's brow arched. What is it? Certified notice, she said, listing everything she's claimed, every asset she's touched, every timeline she's lied about. I want it in writing that we're watching. She slid the envelope across the desk. Alan took it without a word, then reached for his fountain pen and signed the bottom corner. A small, symbolic gesture, but it felt like war paint. Rachel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You think she'll open it? She will, Eileen said. Her voice was steel now. Because people like Haley always think they're smarter, until they realize someone else has already done the math. Alan stood and walked it to his assistant's desk. Make sure this goes priority overnight. Certified. Signature required. Eileen followed the motion with her eyes. As the envelope disappeared through the glass door, a strange stillness settled in her chest. Not relief. Something colder. Anticipation. Because this wasn't grief anymore. This was movement. And across town, somewhere in a rented loft filled with throw pillows and lies, Haley Langford's doorbell was about to ring. The cemetery was almost empty by the time she arrived. The late-day sun stretched long shadows across the headstones, and the wind coming off the river carried the smell of cut grass and distant rain. Eileen parked by the gravel shoulder and walked the rest of the way, with a paper-wrapped bouquet tucked under one arm. Fresh lilies this time. Zach always said roses felt too sorry for themselves. The ground was still damp where they'd buried him. She knelt down, brushing away bits of dried mud that clung to the stone's edge. Her knees sank into the soft earth. The granite was already spotted with pollen and dust, the engraved letters catching faint light. Zachary Thomas Langford, 1999, 2024. Beloved son, soldier, friend. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished surface. She wiped it clean with a cloth she kept folded in her jacket pocket. For a moment she just stared at his name. No words, no prayers, just breath. From somewhere down the path, the low hum of a mower started up, breaking the silence. She laid the flowers gently against the base of the stone. You deserved better than this, she murmured. A voice called from behind her. You're here every week. She turned. It was Tom Ellery, one of Zach's old classmates, now working maintenance at the cemetery. He leaned on the handle of a rake, hat tipped low. She never came, you know, he said after a pause. Not once. Eileen's throat tightened. Haley? He nodded. I figured maybe she came on a weekday or something, but nah. Someone asked her about it at the cafe. She said graves creep her out. The words slid through the air, small and cruel. Eileen let them settle. She didn't reply, didn't trust herself to. Tom shifted awkwardly, realizing he'd said too much. Anyway, he'd like the flowers. She gave him a small nod of thanks, then turned back to the stone. The world seemed to narrow until it was just her, the engraved name, and the ache in her chest that wouldn't fade. She reached out, tracing the Z with her fingertip. Her nails caught the edge of the carving. It felt real, hard and unyielding, unlike everything else. She whispered, I'm still here, honey. I'm not done yet. The wind stirred the lilies. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like a slow drumbeat. The next morning, the sky was gray, the air heavy with the smell of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Rachel was already at the kitchen table when Eileen came downstairs. She'd brought coffee, strong and steaming, poured into Eileen's favorite mug, the chipped one that read, "World's Okayest Mom." Eileen managed a tired smile. "You trying to bribe me into breakfast?" Rachel shook her head. "Trying to make sure you eat it all." Eileen sat down, wrapping her hands around the mug. The warmth helped, but only a little. She'd barely slept again, the night spent replaying Alan's voice, Haley's name, Zach's messages. On the table lay a yellow legal pad, open to a blank page. The top line read, "Probate Court, Victim Impact Statement." Rachel nodded toward it. "You're really doing this?" Eileen looked down at the page, then at the stack of documents beside it. Bank statements, screenshots, photos, evidence, all of it. "I'm not writing for the court," she said quietly. "I'm writing for him." Rachel leaned back, watching her. "What are you going to say?" Eileen uncapped a pen. "The truth. All of it." She began to write, slow and deliberate. Her handwriting was small, steady, the way it used to be when she filled out Zach's school forms. The first words came easily. "My son trusted people he shouldn't have." She paused. "He believed in loyalty. He believed in love. And someone took advantage of that belief for money, for convenience, for ego." Ink pooled slightly where her pen lingered too long. Rachel said softly, "She's not going to see this coming." Eileen looked up, eyes tired but sharp. "That's the point." Outside, rain began to fall, tapping against the window like a metronome. She signed her name at the bottom of the page, then whispered to herself, half promise, half prayer. Let her see what real grief looks like. The knock came just after 10 a.m. 3 sharp raps, calm but deliberate. Eileen glanced at the front door, still in her robe, coffee cooling on the kitchen counter. Rachel looked up from the breakfast nook, eyebrows raised. "You expecting someone?" she asked. "No." Eileen walked to the door and opened it slowly. The man standing on her porch wasn't dressed in full uniform, but the leather badge on his hip and the clipped manner said everything she needed to know. "Ms. Langford?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." "I'm Officer Halstead with the Suffolk County Financial Crimes Division. Mind if I ask you a few questions? Shouldn't take long." Eileen's jaw tightened, but she stepped aside and held the door open. "Come in." Halstead removed his cap and entered, eyes taking in the house with a detective's quiet instinct. He didn't sit until she offered, lowering himself onto the armchair with a slight grunt. He pulled out a small notebook. "This is about a credit card issued in your son's name. We had a flagged transaction from Bank of New England. Your name is on the estate file, so it routed through our unit." Eileen stayed still. "What kind of transaction?" "Nordstrom," Halstead replied. 783.42s. Date of transaction, September 26th. He looked up. "That's 2 weeks after Zach's death." Rachel's mug hit the table a little harder than intended. Eileen crossed the room and opened the filing cabinet. "Give me a second." She pulled the folder labeled Banking, Postmortem, and thumbed through clipped statements. She stopped at the right page, slid it free, and handed it over. Halstead scanned it quickly. "Yep, that's the charge." "She kept using his card," Eileen said. "You'll see a pattern. Restaurants, travel, beauty services, all dated after he passed." Halstead flipped back and forth. "Any chance he gave her permission? In writing?" Eileen didn't answer. She walked to the kitchen drawer, opened the accordion folder of legal papers Alan had labeled potential contested items, and returned with a photocopy. She handed it to Halstead. "Power of attorney," she said. "Signed last fall. We're already challenging its validity in probate, but even if it were legitimate." She tapped the paper. "It expires on death. Legally." Halstead's eyes moved to the expiration clause printed near the bottom. He nodded slowly. That's what I needed. Rachel leaned in from the dining room. So, what happens now? I'm not here to make arrests, he said. Not yet. But continued use of a deceased person's card, especially without explicit posthumous consent, that's financial exploitation under Massachusetts Code 266. And if she used that card across state lines... Federal, Eileen said flatly. Halstead offered a faint smile. You know your stuff. I've had a crash course. He tucked the papers into a manila envelope and stood. You may be contacted by someone from our investigations unit. We're not the only ones looking into Haley Langford right now. Eileen followed him to the door. She won't be hard to find. She's allergic to privacy. Halstead chuckled. That'll help. He tipped his head. Appreciate your time, ma'am. He left without another word, walking briskly down the driveway, radio crackling faintly at his hip. Eileen closed the door behind him and leaned her back against it, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath all morning. Rachel appeared a second later, holding back the curtain just an inch. Unmarked cruiser, she whispered. He parked under the maple. Eileen didn't move. Rachel turned to her, voice low. That felt different. It was. How? Eileen looked her dead in the eyes. Because I'm not the one knocking anymore. It took 3 days for the call to come. Eileen was weeding the side garden when her phone buzzed against the porch railing. Unknown number. Boston area code. She wiped her hands on her jeans and answered. Ms. Langford, Officer Halstead. She stood, heart thudding. Yes. Just wanted to update you before the paperwork hits the court. We've verified multiple post-mortem charges under your son's name. Enough to justify a formal fraud inquiry. Eileen swallowed. So it's official. Official and escalating, Halstead said. We're referring the case to federal financial crimes. They'll handle anything crossing state lines. Her grip tightened on the phone. The air felt sharper somehow. Does she know? She will by mail. Certified notification goes out today. Good, Eileen said, her voice steady. Let her read it. Halstead paused, then added. Ms. Langford, this doesn't happen often. People get away with this sort of thing because families are too tired to fight. You're not tired. No, she said. I'm not. He chuckled once, low and approving. Then you just made her life a lot harder. By nightfall, the storm broke. Rachel was at the kitchen counter scrolling her phone when she froze. Oh my God, she muttered. Eileen, come look at this. Eileen set down the folder she'd been sorting and crossed the room. Rachel turned the phone around. It was Haley's Instagram story, bright text over a blurred photo of a wine glass. Imagine losing your husband and having his mother try to ruin your life. Hearts toxic sao, stay strong, hearts on truth, will out. Below that, another post appeared within minutes. Mother-in-law's trying to ruin me. Guess grief makes people crazy. Eileen's jaw tightened. The comments were already piling in. Friends, strangers, digital. Sympathizers ready to crown Haley as the wronged widow. Ugh, some people never stop. You don't owe anyone your pain. Sending love, girl. You're doing your best. Rachel muttered. Unbelievable. She's spinning it already. Eileen didn't answer. She turned, walked to the desk, and opened her laptop. The inbox pinged with a new email from Alan. Subject: Filed petition. Asset freeze. Preliminary. The message was short. Probate motion submitted to suspend transfers pending fraud investigation. Expect a counter response within 48 hours. A.W. Eileen exhaled, slow and deliberate. He filed it. Rachel looked up from her phone. So that means... It means she can't touch another cent, Eileen said. A few minutes later, Eileen's phone buzzed again, Alan's name flashing across the screen. She answered immediately. She's lawyered up, he said without preamble. Got some boutique civil attorney out of Denver. He called me an hour ago. Let me guess. He sounded nervous. Alan almost laughed. Panicked. He asked if we'd be open to mediation. I told him we don't mediate fraud. What did he say? He said, and I quote, Haley Langford didn't know she wasn't authorized to use the card. Eileen's tone went razor flat. Of course she didn't. Alan continued. We'll push to have the court freeze all estate disbursements until this clears. It's a stall tactic, but it puts her on defense. Rachel, overhearing, mouthed. She's losing control. Eileen nodded. Good. Let her flail. Alan's tone softened. You're handling this better than most. I'm not handling it, she said. I'm correcting it. He didn't argue. I'll call after the judge signs the temporary order. The call ended. Outside, dusk settled like smoke. The rain from earlier had stopped, leaving the streets slick and glinting under streetlights. Rachel poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one over. She didn't expect this, she said quietly. Someone like you, pushing back. Eileen looked at her, half smiling. People like her never expect anyone to push back. Rachel swirled her glass. What happens when she calls you? Eileen's eyes flicked to her phone on the counter. She won't. The words had barely left her mouth when the phone lit up. Haley. Blocked caller. It rang once, twice, then again. Rachel's eyes widened. You've got to be kidding. Eileen reached over and silenced it without looking. The screen dimmed to black. A moment later, another notification appeared, a voicemail icon. No words, no caller ID, just one new message. Eileen stared at it for a long time. Rachel whispered, You're not going to listen, are you? Eileen didn't answer. Her reflection in the window looked calm, almost serene. But her hands, steady, strong, closed the phone like a blade being sheathed. Outside, thunder rolled low across the horizon. Whatever Haley had buried, it was starting to surface. The hallway outside courtroom 4B smelled faintly of old coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Eileen sat on the wooden bench just past the double doors, hands folded neatly in her lap, legs crossed at the ankle like she wasn't waiting to upend someone's life. Across from her, Haley paced. She wore all black. Not morning black, designer black. Oversized sunglasses, red bottom heels, a tight blouse that screamed curated grief. Her hair was perfect. Her hands, less so. They flitted from her phone to her water bottle to her bag and back again, tremoring at the edges. Eileen didn't look at her. She didn't have to. She could feel the heat of Haley's panic from 20 feet away. Rachel stood beside her, still and sharp in a charcoal blazer, her presence quiet but solid. A grounding rod. A clerk called them in. The courtroom was small. Probate division rarely warranted an audience. Just rows of stiff pew-like benches, a carved seal behind the judge's bench, and a white noise machine humming in the corner to discourage eavesdropping. Judge Wren was middle-aged, silver-haired, and clearly unimpressed by drama. Ms. Langford, she said evenly, looking at Eileen first. Mr. Wexler, Ms. Peter, Langford's petition to remove spousal rights from the estate is officially on record. Let's proceed. Alan stood, buttoning his suit jacket with a practiced calm. Your Honor, we have submitted evidence of estrangement, financial misconduct, and fraudulent representation, all impacting Haley Langford's legal standing as next of kin. Haley's attorney, young, sharp-suited, visibly sweating, rose. We object to the characterization of fraud. The respondent acted under the assumption she had durable authority. The power of attorney was expired, Judge Wren cut in. That point is established. He swallowed and sat back down. Alan continued. We've presented credit card transactions post-death, which Ms. Langford used without consent. We've also provided verified social posts, tagged locations, and third-party statements confirming she had not lived with the decedent for over 6 months prior to his passing. The judge flipped through the file. Instagram posts, spa charges, travel expenses, Sedona, Denver, Nashville. Quite the itinerary. Haley fidgeted, arms crossed. Alan pressed on. Additionally, we've submitted a document, an unsigned amendment to the trust, written by Zachary Langford himself. While not enforceable, it demonstrates his intention to revise beneficiary designation. He held up the page carefully, then handed it to the clerk. The judge scanned it, her mouth twitching slightly at the blank signature line. "And the rationale for the amendment?" she asked. Alan nodded toward Eileen. Witness testimony and private messages indicate increasing distance, conflict, and concern for misuse of financial ties. His mother can corroborate. The judge looked at Eileen. Eileen didn't move, didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence, deliberate, dignified, filled the room more than words ever could. Haley stood suddenly. "He would have wanted me to have it all." The judge arched an eyebrow. "I'm sorry?" Tears sprang instantly to Haley's eyes as if on cue. "We had problems, yes, but we were married. I supported him in my own way. I don't have the receipts for that." Alan murmured, "That's kind of the point." Haley's voice wobbled. "You don't understand. He loved me." The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "What I understand, Ms. Langford, is that this court relies on evidence, not sentiment, not hashtags, and certainly not retroactive narratives." She closed the file. "In light of the documents presented, the court finds sufficient cause to revoke Ms. Langford's claim to the estate. Her standing as surviving spouse is void pending further review by the federal investigation already underway." Silence. Cold. Absolute. Then Haley inhaled like she'd been slapped. Rachel leaned in, whispering, "That's it." The judge stood. "Court is adjourned." The gavel didn't slam. It clicked, soft and final. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Haley stood frozen, her mouth moving, her lawyer trying to usher her toward the sidewalk as reporters began to gather. Eileen ignored them all. She walked down the steps slowly, one hand grazing the metal railing, Rachel beside her like a shadow. At the bottom, her phone vibrated. Another blocked call. This time, no voicemail, just silence. She let it ring out. Because for the first time in weeks, Haley had nothing left to say. The email came in just after 8 a.m. Subject, confirmation. Card was never authorized. Post-death. From Alan Wexler. To Eileen Langford. Eileen opened it at the kitchen table, Zach's old hoodie draped over the back of the chair beside her. Steam rose from her untouched coffee. Her hands were still damp from washing dishes when she clicked on the attachment. A scanned letter from the credit card company. Clear as daylight. No secondary user was ever listed, no permissions updated, no survivor access logged. Bank of New England Fraud Division. She read it 3 times before leaning back in her chair, exhaling like she'd finally let go of something she'd been holding in her lungs for weeks. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was Officer Halstead. "Just read the email," Eileen said before he could speak. He grunted. "Good. I'll forward it to federal. This gives them teeth." "Is it enough? For financial exploitation and fraudulent access of a decedent's account?" "Yeah, it is." She listened as he flipped through something on his end, probably the case file. "Ms. Langford, it's not just the spending, it's the intent," he said. "She never canceled the card, never called the bank, just kept using it, like your son didn't exist." "She buried the person," Eileen said, voice low, "but kept the plastic." Halstead didn't disagree. "I'll be in touch. You may be asked to give a statement." "Gladly," she said, and hung up. Later that afternoon, a message pinged Eileen's phone. Unknown number, no name. It was a screenshot, followed by a second and a third. 3 separate text exchanges. The contact name on the first read Liz, Studio Yoga. In them, Haley bragged casually, too casually, about Zach's insurance. When the payout hits, I swear I'm buying something stupid, like a jet ski, or a retreat in Tulum. Guess grief pays. The last one hit harder. He was barely cold, and they already sent half to my account. Karma's real, babe. Eileen stared at the texts. Her stomach turned, but her hands stayed steady. She scrolled down. There was one final message from the unknown sender. We were friends once. I didn't know it would go this far. Thought you deserved to see it. She didn't reply. She forwarded the entire string to Alan. That evening, she met Rachel at the cafe off Ashmont Street. A quiet place with wide booths and low lighting, the kind of spot you go when you need to breathe, but don't want to be alone. Rachel stood when she walked in, and for once didn't say anything. She just hugged her. Long, hard, no pretense. Eileen let herself rest in the warmth of it, just for a moment. When they sat, Rachel pushed a latte across the table. It's his birthday in 2 weeks. I know, Eileen said. She didn't need reminding. She'd already circled the date on the calendar at home, in blue pen. Zach's favorite color. Not for grief, not for ceremony, just to remember. Do you want to do something? Rachel asked. Maybe, Eileen said softly. Something small, quiet. Rachel nodded. He'd like that. Their food arrived, but neither touched it. Eileen's phone buzzed again. Another email from Alan. Filing a civil claim for restitution. Haley will be served this week. We're also attaching punitive damages based on intent to defraud and emotional harm. A.W. Rachel read over her shoulder. Civil too? Eileen nodded. She's going to lose more than just money. She already did, Eileen said. Rachel didn't ask what she meant. 2 days later, Eileen stood at the mailbox in her coat, the wind slicing sharp through her sleeves. She opened it and pulled out a single white envelope with a red stamp across the front. Subpoena. Notice to appear. It wasn't for her. It was addressed to Haley Langford. Eileen smiled, just slightly, and slipped it into a manila envelope Alan had prepared weeks ago. Then she walked back inside, picked up a marker, and uncapped the lid. She stood in front of the calendar, hand hovering over the square marked October 23rd, Zach's birthday. And below it, she wrote 2 small words. She answers. The story broke on a Thursday. War widow accused of defrauding dead husband's estate. That was the lower third graphic. The anchor's voice was calm, almost clinical. Eileen sat at the kitchen counter, the TV volume low, watching without blinking. A photo of Zach in uniform appeared on screen, his smile stiff but sincere. Then Haley, a glamour shot pulled from social media, all filters and eyelashes, now framed with the words, "Under investigation." Rachel muted it halfway through. You don't have to watch, she said gently. I know, Eileen replied, but she didn't look away. The segment ran less than 3 minutes. They cited court records, the estate freeze, and the pending federal inquiry. No speculation, no sensationalism, just facts. Exactly what Eileen had always wanted. Rachel's phone buzzed again, its 5th time in an hour. Another reporter, she sighed. Channel 5 this time, they want a quote. Don't give them one. Already didn't? Eileen stood slowly, stretched her stiff back. I'm going for a walk. You sure? Eileen nodded. I need air. Rachel opened her mouth to offer company, then thought better of it. She simply handed over a scarf and nodded toward the door. Be careful. Outside, the wind carried the faint chill of October, crisp and sharp against her cheeks. Eileen pulled the scarf tighter around her neck and walked with purpose, past rows of porch mums and shuttered windows until the sidewalk gave way to gravel. The cemetery gates creaked softly as she pushed them open. The place was nearly empty, except for a groundskeeper in the distance trimming hedges with slow precision. Eileen's boots crunched over the path as she made her way toward the northern hill. Row 17. Plot 24. Zach's stone stood clean, firm, unchanged. She paused a few feet away, letting herself just look. No performance, no press, just him. She'd brought something this time. Folded carefully in her canvas tote was the flag from his casket, tightly pressed into the regulation triangle. Stars up, no stripes showing. She hadn't touched it since the funeral, hadn't been ready. She knelt in the cold earth and placed it at the base of the stone. A long silence passed. A plane flew low overhead. Leaves danced quietly across the grass. "I didn't let them turn you into a headline," she murmured. But her? She made her own. She rested a hand against the stone, palm flat. "You should be turning 26 next week," she said. "You should be here." But the grief didn't rise the way it used to. It still hurt. God. It still hurt, but not in the way that left her breathless. It had been replaced with something weightier, steadier. Justice wasn't grief's cure, but it was, finally, its witness. Back at the house, Rachel sat scrolling through Haley's public Instagram, what was left of it. "Everything's gone," she said aloud, not expecting a reply. Haley had deleted every photo of Zach, every tribute, every video montage. It was all white space now, just curated travel shots, some cryptic quotes, and a new bio. "You never know someone until you lose them. Healing is ugly." Below it, a wave of comments continued rolling in. "You're disgusting." "So you robbed a dead man now?" "Where's your truth now, Queen?" Rachel scrolled further, jaw tight. "She can delete his pictures," she muttered, "but she can't erase who he was." She closed the app, eyes drawn to the calendar. 2 days until October 23rd, Zach's birthday. She reached for a post-it, scribbled a note, and stuck it beside the circled date. "Cemetery, 3 p.m. I'll bring cider." Just as she finished, the front door creaked open. Eileen stepped inside. Rachel turned to greet her but froze, because Eileen's hands were empty now. She wasn't carrying pain. She wasn't carrying anger. Just a small folded triangle of cotton, damp at the corners from morning dew, and a quiet that finally felt earned. The email came through Alan's encrypted portal. Subject: Settlement Offer, Langford v. Langford Estate, CIV 256041. Attached: Proposal, $10,000 in exchange for withdrawal of all civil claims. Eileen read it once. Then again. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her breath didn't catch. She just sat there, stone still, coffee untouched beside her, as the number blinked up at her like a joke with a punchline she'd already outgrown. Rachel leaned against the counter behind her, arms folded. 10,000? "That's what they think he's worth," Eileen said quietly. Rachel scoffed. "It wouldn't cover half a semester at UMass." Alan called 10 minutes later, voice calm as ever. "She's bleeding cash," he said. "Between the estate freeze, the legal fees, the fraud investigation, her accounts are drying up. That offer is desperation in a blazer." "Why now?" "Because the court set a discovery deadline," he explained. "She knows we're getting access to sealed accounts. We're about to find more." Eileen didn't ask what. She didn't need to. Alan paused. "You can crush her in court. You will. Eventually. But the longer this drags out, the more headlines. The more noise. You've already won the narrative. What matters now is what kind of ending you want." She was quiet for a long time. Alan didn't fill the silence. He knew her too well for that now. Eileen hung up without deciding. She went upstairs, sat at Zach's old desk. ran her fingertips over the dented surface where he'd carved his initials with a Swiss Army knife when he was 12. She opened the top drawer and pulled out a photo, one he'd mailed from his first tour. Smiling in front of a battered Humvee, sunburned, his arm around a fellow soldier she never got to meet. On the back, in crooked all caps, he'd written, "Still standing, still laughing, still got my dumb optimism. Love you, Mom." She stared at the word optimism for a long time. Zach had believed in doing the right thing, not the loudest thing, not the easiest, just the right one. She picked up her phone and called Alan back. When Alan read her counteroffer aloud to Haley's attorney the next morning, there was a long silence on the other end of the call. "She wants what?" the man finally said. "Double," Alan repeated. 20,000, and a written acknowledgement that the funds are not a payout, but a restitution settlement. That language stays, or we go public. Again. More silence, then. "That's not how settlements work." Alan smiled without warmth. "It is now." The check arrived by courier 3 days later. Certified envelope, postmarked from Denver. Haley didn't sign it herself. Her lawyer did. The money didn't stay in Eileen's account long. She had it wired that same afternoon to the Sergeant Zachary Langford Memorial Scholarship, an account she'd opened through the local Veterans Association 2 weeks earlier. Anonymous donors had already begun pitching in. But this became the seed money. She never made a speech, never posted about it. But she watched the fund grow quietly, month by month. One mother donated in memory of her son, who hadn't made it home from Iraq. A young widow added $50 and a note that read, "He reminds me of someone I loved once." Eileen read every message, replied to none. They weren't for her. They were for Zach. A month later, Alan called to confirm the civil suit had been officially closed. "She took the deal, like we knew she would," he said. "Anything else?" "One detail," he added. "She asked if there was any way to keep the filing sealed. We said no." Rachel was standing at the sink when Eileen ended the call. "So it's done?" "It's done." Rachel exhaled. "And her name?" Eileen shook her head. "I'm not saying it again." And she didn't. Not at Thanksgiving. Not when the final estate paperwork arrived. Not when the check cleared. Not when the story faded from the news cycle. In the months that followed, Haley's face vanished from feeds. She moved, deleted accounts, retreated into digital shadows. She didn't fight back. Not anymore. Because there was nothing left to win. And Eileen never spoke her name again. Not out of mercy, but because she refused to give it weight. The last time she spoke about her at all was this: "She's just the footnote. He's the story." The flyer was simple. Navy blue and white, printed on thick cardstock. The Zach Carter Fund supporting transitional housing and mental health care for returning veterans, founded in memory of Sergeant Zachary Thomas Langford, 1999-2024. It didn't mention lawsuits, didn't mention fraud, didn't mention Haley, because none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was what lasted. The local paper ran a short profile the day the fund went live. Just above the fold, Eileen, standing near the war memorial downtown, wearing her late husband's peacoat and holding a photo of Zach in her gloved hand. The journalist had asked if she wanted to speak on record. Eileen had nodded. She kept it brief. "He believed in showing up for people when they were at their lowest. I wanted to do the same. No spin, no spectacle, just that." The journalist didn't ask about the legal case. Didn't need to. She got the story exactly right. That weekend, Rachel came over with a stack of race bibs and a clipboard full of release forms. "You're not getting out of this," she said, pointing to the bib with Eileen's name on it. "We're registered. Memorial 5K, next Saturday." Eileen raised an eyebrow. "I haven't run since the Reagan administration." "You'll walk it." The point is to show up. Eileen nodded. That word again. Show up. Rachel dropped the papers onto the dining table and opened her laptop. We've already got over 100 RSVPs. Veterans groups are carpooling in from Worcester and Braintree. One family's driving up from Maryland. Eileen blinked. Why? Rachel turned the screen so she could see. A message board full of notes. Emails. Comments. Most started the same way. I didn't know Zach. But my son came home broken and would have loved this. I'm a Gold Star mom. You're doing something sacred. Eileen sat down slowly. Her hands found her lap. Her chest felt tight in the best kind of way. This wasn't just healing. It was making something whole. The day of the run was bright and brisk, just cool enough to see your breath. The church had opened its parking lot for registration, and a small team of volunteers handed out cider, race packets, and pins bearing Zach's initials. Eileen didn't walk at the front. She stayed in the middle of the pack, moving slowly, flanked by Rachel and a veteran named Terrell, who'd served 2 tours with Zach's old unit. He was the only guy I ever met who could quote Parks and Rec and disassemble a rifle in under 30 seconds. Terrell said mid-stride. Eileen laughed, unexpected and real. That sounds like him. When they crossed the finish line, a cheer went up. Nothing wild, just warm, kind, earned. Rachel hugged her. You did it. Eileen shook her head. We did. That Sunday, Eileen returned to the church where Zach's funeral had been held. The same pews, same windows, different silence. The church staff had reserved a corner of the lobby for her request. A modest bronze plaque, mounted beneath an old photo of Zach from a youth group trip when he was 15. He was grinning, half sunburned, wearing a Boston Red Sox cap backwards. The plaque read, "In loving memory of Sergeant Zachary Thomas Langford who served, who showed up, who made us better. 1999, 2024. Eileen placed her hand on the edge of the frame. It was warm from the morning sun. She didn't cry, didn't need to. Grief had left its mark, but legacy was what stayed. Later that week, she and Rachel sat on the back porch, cider mugs steaming between them, legs wrapped in wool blankets as a soft October dusk set in. Do you ever think about what he'd say? Rachel asked, if he saw all this? Eileen watched the sky go from amber to lavender. Not every day, but today I think he'd tell me to keep going. Rachel smiled. He'd be proud of you, E. Eileen turned to her, eyes calm and clear. He already was. The envelope had lived quietly in her nightstand for months, sealed, untouched, marked in Zach's handwriting. Mom, if I'm not back. Eileen had carried it from room to room over the past few weeks, folded it into a book, tucked it behind receipts, set it on her desk, then put it away again. It had weight beyond paper, like it knew exactly how much it mattered. Now, on a still October morning, one day after the memorial race, 2 days before what would have been his 26th birthday, she finally sat down and placed it gently on the dining room table. She didn't make tea, didn't play music, didn't call Rachel. This was hers. Outside, leaves spun lazily across the driveway. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world moved on. She stared at the envelope a while longer, then finally slid her finger under the flap. The letter was 3 pages, typed, double-spaced, like he'd wanted her to be able to breathe between the lines. At the top, it read simply, "If you're reading this, I didn't come home, and I'm sorry." Her breath caught. Not a sob, just a pause. "I know you'll want to fix everything. You always do. But if I'm gone, I need you to do something else. I need you to live, not just survive. Live. Don't spend the rest of your life guarding a grave." Eileen blinked hard, vision blurring at the edges. "There's a folder in the fireproof box labeled letters. One's for you, one's for Rachel, one's for Eli. And yeah, there's one for Haley too. You can decide if she ever sees it. You'll know best by then. She exhaled slowly, one hand gripping the table's edge. I know things have been weird. With Haley. With me. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like your voice didn't matter. It did. It always did. But sometimes, love makes us blind. I didn't see things I should have seen. Maybe that's on me. But I want you to know, whatever happens, I don't blame you. I trust you. Eileen closed her eyes. You showed up for me every time, even when I didn't want you to. So now I'm asking you to show up one last time for someone else. For the next kid like me who thinks they're alone, give someone a way forward. Give them hope. You're better at that than you think. She smiled faintly. Too late, she whispered. If this world has any justice, you'll outlive the pain. And if I had one last wish, it would be this. Let what we were become something more. Not just memory, momentum, and hey, happy birthday to me. Make sure Rachel gets me a stupid cake. You know the one. Love you always, Zach. She didn't cry at the end. Instead, she folded the letter back with careful hands and slid it into the small wooden box where she kept her wedding ring, Zach's high school dog tags, and the hospital bracelet from the day he was born. Then she stood, walked to the back porch, and sat under the oak tree that had once shaded Zach's childhood birthday parties. The breeze was cool, but not sharp. It felt like something shifting, something letting go. Rachel arrived a half hour later with a cake box and 2 plastic forks. Triple chocolate, she said, holding it up. I didn't even bother slicing it. Eileen chuckled. He'd approve. They sat in companionable silence, eating straight from the tray like teenagers. Rachel glanced at her sideways. You okay? I will be. They sat like that until the sun began to dip, casting long gold shadows over the lawn. When Rachel finally stood to leave, she reached over and squeezed Eileen's hand once. I'm proud of you. Eileen didn't say anything right away. Just looked toward the sky, soft and pink and impossibly wide. Then she said, he already was. And this time, she believed it.